everyone. Welcome back to another Parallel Barking. This is Ariana, and I'm here with
Larry Backer, woof woof.
Bark
Welcome
Bark.
back.
We're talking today, finally, it's been at least 5 weeks of this, about the protests that have been ongoing in Iran. Um, they were sparked based on a the death of a 22-year-old woman who Mahsa Amini. She died in a hospital 3 days after being arrested in Tehran by the state's morality police, known as guidance patrols. And the reason she was detained or arrested was because her headscarf or her hijab was too loose. She showed too much hair underneath the headscarf. And so, of course, that sparked a lot of anger and unrest among especially the young women living in Iran who feel that the rules being observed right now are too strenuous and too strict. So many are roaming the streets without hijab or with the hijab on their hands, waving them in the air, taking it upon themselves, risking their own safety, cutting their own hair, taking to social media, burning their own hijabs. The protests have swept through more than 40 Iranian cities, and now I think they've stabilized in 19 cities. But as I think we mostly are aware, Iran is not a stranger to protests.
Well, what country nowadays is a stranger to protest?
Right.
I mean, even the Chinese had a little mini protest in Beijing a couple of days before the 20th Party Congress, which was quite an eyebrow-raising event in a country where certainly around the party congresses that would have been unheard of. So yeah, protests.
Yeah. And the January 6th, I don't know if I'd call that protest.
Well, whatever you call it is going to be a loaded term, the events of January 6th, and then we can leave other people to fill in however they want to characterize it.
Right.
All right. But this one is very interesting for a number of reasons. I mean, it's a hugely interesting and complicated matter now, and one that's become quite serious. I was in London when the protests started all over Europe. So we're not really dealing with just protests within Iran. This has struck a chord, and it struck a chord not just in the country for a variety of reasons that we're going to get to, I think, hopefully, but it struck a chord internationally, especially around gender politics, around ethnic politics, and about, in a sense, about the nature and quality of the control of the state of individuals and the way in which it is undertaken on the bodies, especially on the bodies in this case of women. It's an incredibly interesting thing, but something else has gone on. The protests have been much. I think we're going to talk to this in a second. It's much broader than I think even you've intimated, but it's also now morphed. And what was it today? I guess there was a little bit of a fire.
Yes, at the Evin prison, there was a fire and gunshots, of course, at the prison where political prisoners and anti-government activists are
And
kept.
foreigners.
Oh, yes. Well, and dual citizenship everyone um, are kept. Um, and the IRNA, the state-run IRNA, reported that the clashes were between the rioters and the security official personnel.
Oh, sure, sure. I mean, official stories are official stories, and you'd hope to God that their propaganda ministry would be on the ball enough to concoct some kind of story that would be plausibly acceptable. That's a given.
Yeah.
The question really is then what's lying underneath these stories, and it's the same everywhere with respect to the way in which press organs are managed to produce both the orthodox narrative of power and then the other narratives that occur.
Yeah, the official statement was that prisoners set fire to a warehouse full of prison uniforms, which
Cool.
caused
Well,
a
yeah,
blaze.
they're probably out of style. No one
Yeah,
wears out of
that's
style for the
very
uniform.
maddening.
Yeah. So what do you think of all of this? Yay, nay, it's going somewhere, it's not going somewhere, it's a tragedy, it's interesting.
I want it so badly to go somewhere. I really do.
And by somewhere, you mean where?
I want, of course, rights to be expanded for everyone, for women. I want people to be able to have the independence that they deserve and um, that they desire and that they fight for so desperately. I I
So you're very sympathetic.
I want that for these people, but I also realize the reality of the situation, which is protests like these have been squashed since 1979, and before that.
Oh, sure, sure. Before it was the imperial machinery that the Shah's machinery that did it, and then it was the mullah's machinery that did it. Power is power, by whatever trappings you clothe it in, and whatever ideology is being pushed as
and
orthodox.
and we have volunteers in the Basij, who is the force, the mobilized force that comes in and actually um, helps to oppress the protesters because they have been trained to do that.
Yeah, yeah. No, all of this is true, but let's fine tune the analysis, I think. And I am very sympathetic to not just the women, but to the men and boys and the girls, all of whom this is a broad movement. And then which is a broad movement against what? That's
But
really
it
the
is,
question.
but it has changed over the years, noting that um, the state has had to deal with social media in recent years, cutting off the whatever connection that people have to the internet or trying to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, of
I
course
don't
they
know
try.
how much success they'll have in the future of doing that, but then again, it also has. I was also reading about the Human Rights Watch and their stance on a few of these things, and I'm sure you have something to say about that, but I also
All of these things, maybe.
that um I mean, well, you can go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, I just want to tease it out a little bit. So here's and you know me, I prefer to tease things out. What looks like a fairly singular black and white picture, I think becomes more interesting when you add a little bit of color to it. And this one is no different. And in fact, it's quite interesting. And again, let me start by saying that in this case, my sympathies are with the protesters, but the more granular analysis will make it a little bit more nuanced. So here we start with this. First question is what was the initial eruption? And the initial eruptions can be looked at from a variety of different perspectives. One of them is, and you've suggested virtually all of them. I just want to reframe them so that we can then begin to think about how all of these are kind of woven together into a even bigger synergistic explosion. One of them is we're weaving in, like you said, protests that had not gone very far, but the accumulated frustrations of which have remained unsatisfied since 1979. A lot of it dealing with the inability of people to meet the needs of their family, the economy, and general malaise exacerbated by sanctions.
Well, yeah, all of
Right.
the protests have been for different reasons. I mean,
Right. Well, no, but that's fuel. That's fuel. I'm not saying
right.
it's the reason. I'm saying these are, this is fuel. The other one is question of is it a headscarf protest initially, or was it a protest about the absolute abuse of discretion by the morality police? That is, you have these crazy dudes going around and deciding for themselves what is or isn't. Oh my God, you got 2 strands of hair out, that's too much. And then you go to another town and it's a little different. And there's a sense of both arbitrariness and impunity, and all grounded in the people with the clubs
Well,
on the
isn't that
street.
always what it is?
But
It's that little spark that leads you.
wait,
Oh, you messed up, but oh, what are you even here for in the first place?
But let me just untangle these, and then the
Okay,
question is
okay.
which, right? Because what I'm suggesting is there are all kinds of different propellants here. There's wood, there's gasoline, there's atomic fuel, there's all kinds of
Right.
stuff lying around, but all of it now exploding at roughly the same time. So one of
Right.
them is this old stuff that comes in. The other one is it in fact the corruption and arbitrariness, the abuse of discretion on the ground with these people. Third is, even if you don't mind the rules because you're very devout and you're more than happy to be guided by the mullahs, and you sense that there may be a place for the morality police, right? You may believe all of that. The question then is, are they really interpreting this correctly, right? And so you've got the impunity, you've got and not just doing it correctly, but in this case, even worse, that in fact the misinterpretation, which is structural, not just crazy people, not just guys on the street who are club happy and who love beating up defenseless women because they're big guys who got nothing else to do, and we can go into their psychology later. But that leads to the next little granular, which is these guys don't like women.
Or do
That
they
it's a
even want
it's
anything interpreted for them at all anymore?
no. It's more fundamental than that. It's the idea of dehumanizing the female,
No, I understand what
which
you're
is what,
saying.
but this is no, it's deeper than that. It's fundamentally un-Islamic. And so now all of a sudden, what makes this infuriating is that even if you're religious, the way in which they are applying the rules beyond the impunity, the anti-feminist way in which they're applying it is in fact itself un-Islamic and heretical and likely a matter of significant concern to religious people who are looking at this and saying, well, you've now perverted our own religion that we believe in very deeply. So here you've got this conflation of misogyny, anti-feminism, the objectification of women, and in the context of Islamic theory and Islamic jurisprudence, you may actually have a corruption of the faith. So we're moving and each of these will trigger different segments of the population, perhaps in different ways. And then the last element in all of this is the ethnic element. Kurds, right? And I believe that the initial victim was a woman from the Kurdish part of Iran. At some point, the Iranian state apparatus decided that this was some kind of action by the restive Kurdish populations to destabilize the country, and then moved against Kurdish minorities. I think another woman who was beaten to a pulp and killed was an Azeri woman. And so you've got little bits of ethnic chauvinism here, which you mix in. So this is an extraordinary cocktail. You mix ethnic chauvinism with potentially un-Islamic action by the core of an Islamic disciplinary unit. You mix that in with impunity on the part of a morality police whose ties to a faithful observation of the faith and the rules are questionable at best, right? And then on top of that, you pile all of this on a huge pyre of grievances that have been building up for 20 or 30 years. And all you have to do is strike a match. And that match was lit by those clubs beating these poor young women to a pulp. And then boom. And so there's all kinds of things going on here mixed up in this porridge of unhappiness. And as in most large organizations, the higher ups, in this case, the theocratic overlords of Iran, are not only clueless because they're so distanced from what's going on the ground, or they may actually believe all of this, which is for the Iranians much more problematic. They may be not only clueless, but they may be so detached from all of this generationally that they have absolutely no finger on the pulse of what is going on in their own country today. And that is something that is an affliction that is occurring in virtually every state on the globe.
Yeah, I mean, are you are you guessing or are you stating the obvious? I mean, because I think that's
Well,
actually
I'm
what's
stating the
happening.
obvious, whether I can't get into anyone's head, and certainly being able to get into anyone's head in this region is well above my pay grade. But this seems to be screaming out from even the little bit of news reports that come out. So in that context, right, if you really wanted to support the regime, you've got a moment. This is, I mean, all countries are at this point now, in a sense. You've got this moment of truth. Because if you mean to keep this theocratic system headed by these the mullahs, right, and the mullah structure, and then you have to stop and ask yourself, have we made a mess of this? Have we become an un-Islamic caricature of the thing that we thought we were putting in place when we got rid of the Shah? Have we become nothing more than the Shah, except using Quranic words heretically, using Quranic words heretically to mask our own kind of un-Islamic oppression?
But see,
And
in this form of government, who is allowed to question?
well, but that's the problem. Ultimately, at some point, if you are a believer, at some point, the hand of God is going to come down very hard on these folks who, while they clothe themselves in the raiments of religious leaders, are actually despising the religion itself. And at some point, they're gonna have to pay. And it won't be humans who will be exacting the price. If again, if you're in this and that's the discourse you're looking at, that's what you're looking at. If you're looking at it from a realpolitik standpoint, if you're looking at it from the perspective of the dignity of women, if you're looking at it from ethnopolitics, in all of those cases, we got to the same inflection point. They've really crossed a line here after crossing many lines, and in a context where they've given nothing, but they've taken everything. People are hungrier, poorer. Their lives are much less rich than they were. That's not a bargain that a state can make with its people for very long before people get upset and wind up on the street as they have here.
Yeah, I mean, you made a really good point about the the authorities or the higher ups being way out of touch. I mean, of all the things that you could be deciding to enforce right now, uh, of all the things that you're spending your time on, it's enforcing dress code for.
Well, but that's it. Look, that's important in the culture. But again, there's ways of enforcing it and ways of not enforcing it. There are ways of being helpful and ways of using it as an excuse for brutality. And the problem is here that whatever one thinks of modest dress in Iran in particular and in Islam in general, none of that, all of that falls away in the face of batons beating the stuffing
Yeah,
out
the
of
threat
young
of
women,
lethal state
right,
violence and
right,
arbitrary
in a
arrest
context
is
worse,
never.
worse, in a context in which they weren't blatantly violating the rules. We're talking about, in most of these cases, what the morality police thought were marginal violations, which for them might as well have been them walking down the streets naked. And that strikes people as fundamentally,
It was, yeah, and especially
grossly
because these
unfair.
people are volunteers. I mean, a lot of times the people who, like, I mean, not the morality police, but the people who are um helping to take in the protesters are volunteers. Like, how are you? I don't know. The this is all just very confusing to me.
Well, that's allowing the mob or a certain faction of the mob to continue to rule. But again, impunity, which is guaranteed by the apparatus of state. And all of this is going to eventually make people very, very mad. Not because
What
of
do you
the
mean
reason,
eventually? I feel
yeah,
like
yeah,
people
no, no,
are very mad.
but mad enough to overthrow a state that had been fairly stable, even if people were complaining about it. The thing is, you reach a point here, and it's the arbitrariness and the unfairness, and the serendipity of the way in which it's being used, and ultimately, this is classical definitions of tyrannical exercises of authority. People will put up with that in inverse proportion to how well fed and entertained they are. And in this case, the Iranians are suffering. And on top of that, they get brutality. And it is the perfect, and it's not just religious, but it's ethno-gendered violations. And now it's ethno-gendered violations on the least able to defend themselves given the norms of the society group of the population. And I'm not talking about women in their prime. Who are they beating up? They're beating up 20 something, females who are now just maturing into womanhood. They're not exactly able to defend themselves, but they're someone's sister, they're someone's daughter, they're part of someone's family and clan. And that kind of impunity, when the violation is marginal, is extraordinary. And that's ultimately at the root of this as well. It's not just the misogyny, but the complete disproportion between, oh yeah, fix your hijab, as opposed to, oh, there's a hair out of place and now I'm going to beat you to death with a baton, and then lie and claim that you had a heart attack. Well, of course you had a heart attack. If I beat you long enough, your heart's going to stop. So I guess technically you did
That
have a
is
heart attack.
technically, yes.
Yeah,
Right.
technically
You can
correct. So,
technically say whatever the hell you want.
right. At that point, people are just um, because you're not dealing with enemies of the state. You're not dealing with people who are actually trying. And what they wind up getting is exactly what they wanted to prevent. Now all women have said, all right, we've put up with this. We may have grumbled, but we'll do it. We all go out, we all wear the stuff. But clearly that's not enough. We can't even feel safe when we're trying to do that. So you know what? No, no. And at that point, everything else comes up too. Oh, and on top of that, we can't get our jobs are going. I can't keep my shop open. I can't protect my sons now. Made their wives maybe blah 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 blah, and it's boom, boom, boom. And of course, people who live, this is all over the world. I wrote an essay about this in 2008. I call it the Versailles Topkapi Palace Forbidden City Complex. People who tend to rule and who tend to detach themselves from their populations, who live in kind of these abstracted Versailles, these complexes, and within this group that they only talk to each other. At some point, they're going to so lose connection to the people that they're going to rule that their rule is necessarily going to start looking not only psychotically disconnected, but ultimately so rigidly arbitrary that a space will be created for them to be swept aside. And that's the danger. And this is a danger of the mulism creation. And they've got only themselves to blame here.
I mean, I have think that most of them know that, but are willing to accept it because the spoils are so great for that short amount of time.
It's possible. It's possible. Again, we can't. The problem is that we can't get into their heads. Who knows? And we certainly aren't attuned enough or sophisticated enough to get into whatever cultural narratives they now naturalized within their own heads. And we certainly can't get into the very nuanced politics in Iran. This is an ancient, ancient culture with narratives, trajectories, and performances of cultures that go back to the first empire, echoes of which continue to resonate. So we can't get into all of that. We know it's there and we can kind of see it, but we can't get into all. We don't know enough, and we certainly can't get into people's heads. But we do see the stuff that is transposable is fairly obvious and clear. And in a world that is far more interconnected, it's not only about whether they are acting out, the politics, the cultural, gender, and religious politics of the Safavid dynasty. It's now done in a very interconnected and global world where narratives are no longer so parochial that you can continue to do whatever you want and assume that either no one else is watching or that people inside have no clue about what's going on outside. It's just not true. And with the huge Iranian diaspora all over the place, that becomes even more impossible. And so that's ultimately the problem. The mullahs cannot create an Iran, a farce empire whose borders are, extend to the highest level of the sky, and that can create this zone, this cone of separation. You can't do this. And that makes whatever it is that they're doing that becomes aberrational beyond tolerable limits impossible to contain given all of these interconnections. And these riots, these notions, the mobilization of global civil society has been enormous and swift, like I said, not just in London, but everywhere. And that is likely not to stop because it's striking chords that resonate virtually everywhere. Chinese women will be committed Marxist-Leninist Chinese women are likely not to be as fond of getting beaten up for minor infractions of the rules as our American women, as our Iranian women, clearly. And so this is, and the point there is the resonance. And that puts the Iranians, I think, the leadership in a bind. But you're absolutely right. One, they may see it and misvalue it, say, who cares? We've prevailed before, we're going to prevail now. Or two, it's only women. At some point, the men will come to their senses and we can continue beating up random women and maintain this thing for whatever other reasons we want to do it. I mean, they may view this, or they may be completely living in a world in their Zuckerberg-like metaverse, in which they believe the reality is the avatars that they've created of themselves in their little palaces,
where they think they're winning.
Well, where they live in a different universe from us or from the rest of Iran.
Yeah.
And again, I cannot emphasize enough both the gendered part of this, but also the ethnic part of this. That will leave scars that are going to be very, very, very hard to disappear.
Yeah, I mean, and the ethnic part is that specifically, and the gender part, is that specifically state driven, or is that individually driven by
Oh, it's
bias
it's a
or
cocktail. It's a cocktail, and mostly because the it's this empire is, in a sense, much more in modern American terms, woke and social justice in terms of equal opportunity than ours, but in weirdly dynamic ways. Weird from our perspective. It's, you know, folks, ethnic groups have been in and out of the Persian Empire for what, several thousand years, in and out, in and out, in and out. The waves of power relationships have been very much in flux, but they're all connected in a lot of ways. And but they're also separate, and things tend to be dynamic. So the way that will play out will be very, very specific and probably quite different among the different groups. The Azeris, the Kurds, and others will likely play in different way. And once you hit the K word, the Kurds, it gets horribly, horribly complicated, because in addition to the continued efforts to create some kind of Kurdistan, maybe even a rump Kurdistan like they did with the Armenians, somewhere out of northern Iraq, Greater Kurdistan implicates the politics of Turkey, and the politics of Syria, and the politics of Iran, and then that gets crazy. So a beating of a woman here, a young woman, really the wrong thing to do at precisely the wrong time by people who should have been severely punished for their actions. It's not just lit
it was
this
just a
area all up.
series of terribly
No,
wrong
it's just
things at
lit
the
it all
terribly
up.
wrong time. Yeah,
On the other hand, this may well have been the time
the right
for
thing.
Iranian society to have that kind of chat about what it means to treat all Muslims in
All
accordance,
people,
right, female and male, in more appropriate
equitable
ways.
ways. How about that?
Yeah, so there you go, all kinds of conversations going on, but I suspect that the violence is not going to end very soon, and I
No.
suspect that even if they're momentarily able to suppress this is not going away, and people are going to remember. And to the extent that they're able to suppress this and they continue beating to death young women on what for most people will begin to look like pretext, it's only postponing.
Yeah, even
And
school age children have been arrested. I mean, according to an Oslo-based group, the Iran Human Rights, they estimate about 201 people have been killed
right,
so far.
right. Oh, and of course, the elephant in the room, and I'll end. This will be the last thing I'm going to say about this tragedy. The elephant in the room is Afghanistan and the Taliban. Right.
Yes.
We have a conversation about this in Iran, and this becomes a weighty matter. But uh, Iran is not the only country with gender issues. Uh, Islamic and non-Islamic gender issues, and the conversations that are being had with the blood of the Iranian people are conversations that would have to spill over generally across this area.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that we can note, but it must be undertaken by the people there, religious leaders, civil leaders, men, women, families. That society will have to decide to live with it, not live with it, expect it or not. And then you'll expect people who, in an interconnected world, who find this to be not very good, are going to migrate. And
Yeah.
that's the last little bit, because
Yeah.
ultimately, at the end of the day, you're going to get continued migration.
If where you migrate opens its doors.
If where you migrate opens the stores, and remember, because there's a vast network of Iranian diaspora, the door opening is now a little bit easier to manage than if you're going to a place where the Iranian diaspora is not there. So uh, not easy, but not as hard as it was, and frankly, even if I were a devout Shia Muslim in Iran right now, and I had a 20-year-old daughter, I would be seriously considering parking her somewhere else, even if it's just for college
Other
for a while.
areas
Yeah,
of the world.
yeah, yeah. Whatever my belief is, I want to be able to dance at her wedding, and the risk is just now the risk of arbitrary, because you can control for things you can control, but you can't control for this arbitrary
You
stuff,
can't control
this
other people.
impunity, and that's what is in part driving people to the streets. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
anyway, woof
Insanity.
woof.
Bark, bark. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate you joining us again, and we'll see you next time.